Okay, we'll give it about 30 seconds to get past the ads. Yes. At this point, I feel like you might actually get a better experience if I just literally posted the lecture recording from last semester, which last semester was just much more stable. I'm extremely disappointed in OBS right now. Okay, so we're back. Let's keep going. So for those of you who have not watched Undertale, who have not played Undertale or heard of it, it's an interesting game. It's a little bit like Earthbound. It's a top-down RPG. Well, it has a very unique twist. Let's see if you can spot it from the trailer here. Undertale, the RPG where no one has to die. What a fantastic logline description. So this game came out in 2015. A lot of you played it, and almost all of you have certainly heard of it. The team size was kind of effectively one. He did add some team members to handle things like miscellaneous art toward the end of development and miscellaneous programming. He did a Kickstarter, got some supporting funds to let him do that. But for a lot of development, what I understand is that it was a team size of one. Okay, it was programmed, drawn, written, and composed by a musician, in fact, not a programmer at heart. This is Toby Fox. He was, I believe, just out of college when this game released. The sales of this game, by this point, it has to be far higher, but when I first created this lecture a few years ago, the sales were at least 2.5 million, okay? And that translates to a conservative estimate of about $17 million. That's pretty good right out of college. That's not too bad, is it? The game has been received extremely well critically, and by users as well. It has a humongous fan community, creating a lot of their own unique content. And the development period for this game was about 2.7 years. The 2-year mark is what a lot of independent games will cite. If you go to PAX and you walk through the Indie Mega Booth and ask how long has this game taken to make, you're going to hear a lot of 1.5 to 2.5 year remarks, okay? So the question is, how on earth did one musician create this? Right? That just seems unbelievable, this amount of impact for one musician just out of college. And the answer doesn't necessarily just boil down to luck, which you might guess, or just a supremely talented person, even though Toby Fox is. When you look at this game's design, you'll see that so many aspects of Undertale are just kind of perfectly decided to work in a low-resourced situation where someone doesn't have a ton of time, they're not an expert in all the fields that the game needs, all the disciplines, though they were certainly an expert in music and writing. If you look at other games, Anthem, right? This is a game created by Electronic Arts, a beautiful, gorgeous game with a lot of resources poured into it. Though I do have to wonder whether Anthem hit the sales numbers that Undertale has. I'm guessing Undertale outsold Anthem by a pretty large margin. Compare Anthem to a game like Undertale. And Undertale just looks extremely, extremely basic and bare in many, many, many instances. And something that you should ask yourself right now is, why did this not matter? You will talk to people who played Undertale, and they will just about never mention the fact that many parts of this game look incredibly barren and very basic. The kind of environments that you could probably create given, half an hour in Microsoft Paint maybe. It's all very consistent though, which makes it look like it was the point. It was on purpose, and it still imparts a lot of character. So deciding what to draw is still very tricky. So here's an idea for you. You want to make something that's small and minimal at first, okay? You always want to start with kind of the MVP. An MVP is kind of an entrepreneurial and business/production term. It refers to minimum viable product. You probably heard this phrase before. The idea is, before you make the big expensive game, before you invest in creating 10 different areas and 10 hours worth of content for your game, you really want to make a first slice, okay? Google, in their virtual reality efforts, first created a device that you may have remember fondly. It was called the Google Cardboard. Have you heard of that? Did anyone get a Google Cardboard back in the day? Yes? Google Cardboard, such an incredible product. It was designed to be cheap, and it was designed to look as charmingly cheap, right? And it was. However, it did work. It came with everything you needed for an interesting first VR experience. So you just kind of popped the back off. You didn't pop the back off. You slid your phone right in. And your phone would be the device that actually computed the virtual world for you. It was cheap, it was effective, and it was very, very fast to make and get shipped and to learn. What do people care about when it comes to VR goggles? What works, what doesn't? And then, once they knew this was a moderate success and probably worth investing a bit more in, then Google decided to move forward with their Daydream final version, which is luxurious, it looks great, it comes with great software that you can just download. And it looks very nice. It's a bit more expensive though. Instead of being like, I think $60, it was like $250 or something like that. And I love talking about this example because one of my students went and one of my advisors, Gloria Park, went and joined the Google Daydream team. Though unfortunately, I believe they've reorganized those efforts into something else. Unfortunately, again, they're reorganizing Stadia and their game teams. Google's deciding maybe game development is a little bit too hard for them right now. So it's unfortunate, but that's beside the point. Let's keep moving. I want to talk about, I want to show you an interview from Toby Fox. He does very, very few interviews. And this is an interesting one because he talks about how the process of making this game went for him. And he also talks about the issues of overscoping and feature creep, which affect many, many teams and affects me a lot, to be honest. Let's go to 128 and listen to what he has to say about making games. Oopsie. Come on. So 120. That's good enough.
And then I got into Homestuck, if you've ever heard of that.
I don't think so.
No.
What is that? What's Homestuck?
Oh, wait. Okay, you guys don't know what Homestuck is? This is amazing.
Please tell.
Okay, so Homestuck is basically this multimedia webcomic by this guy named Andrew Hussey that it started as sort of like this choose-your-own-adventure single-panel comic, and then it morphed into like this ridiculous, like, just massive thing. It's really hard to describe, but it was extremely popular at one point with like people that go to anime conventions, and people were they're all dressing up as like these characters that are from this comic and not even from an anime. It was really weird.
Oh,
anyway, I did the music for that, and that's what most people know me from. Not all the music, but some of it. This is a webcomic, and it had an entire team of musicians. Let's put it that way.
You don't hear about that a lot.
Wait, so how does that work? Is it just hey, hit play on the SoundCloud thing below the panel, or is it like motion graphics, or how does this work?
It's Flash animations.
Okay.
Like there's like a bunch of like static pages. Some of them are animated GIFs. Don't want to pronounce that.
You don't want to get that on the record.
Don't want to demystify GIFs. I
Yeah,
understand.
don't want to demystify the pronunciation of the word GIF, guys.
Oops, my bad. I accidentally clicked the wrong part and put us 8 minutes. We would have to listen for 8 more minutes to get to the right part. I apologize. It's 1:28, not 1:20:08. Okay. Here we go.
Watching like, I don't know, Mr. Bean or whatever on TV, like
All right.
literally everything just transforms who you are and just
Yeah.
causes you to do what you do. So
I was hoping.
Yeah.
You know, when I played Undertale, I singled out Mr. Bean as being a core influence. I love Mr. Bean as well.
How did you map out the scope of Undertale? Was it exactly the size ultimately that you produced? Did you have in mind a certain number of areas that you wanted to tackle? I mean, I guess the idea is taking on the JRPG genre. People imagine some gigantic effort, but Undertale is a pretty scaled-in, great, small, insular world that you can really dive into. So how did you figure out that balance?
well, the thing is, the thing that I learned from doing all these crappy RPG games is like whenever anybody gets this like RPG program for the first time, they're all like, I'm going to make a 60-hour-long Final Fantasy game.
Right.
And 0 people have ever done that. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to make an actual game that I can finish, and it's going to be like 2 hours long. Originally, I predicted Undertale was only going to be like 2 hours long, and I thought every single area was going to be as long as the first one, which is to say like 15 minutes long. The game actually was like 3 times longer than I anticipated in the end.
Interesting.
Yeah, going into your first full game project and being super realistic about the scope of the thing seems like maybe one of the more important things that you could have gone into this armed with. It feels like so many people like tend to bite off more than they can chew, especially if you look at Kickstarters and things like that, where people just can't manage how big they want this thing to be with the amount of time and resources they have.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And actually, I mean, I did my Kickstarter and I said it would be out a year ago, and then it only came out like a month ago. So I'm included in that group of people that I guess underestimated how long it would take.
So, right, even the creator of Undertale had to have quite a few games he made where, oh boy, I'm overscoping and we need to figure this out. He even overscoped on Undertale. His prediction of this being like a 2-hour game turned out to, well, it's going to triple, okay? And so whatever you have to do, you need to be careful not to bite off too much more than you can chew, okay? Typically, you want to start with something small. It's called a vertical slice. You want to create a brief, short experience that encapsulates why your game mechanics are fun, why your theme is good, and then you want to scale that out if it works, and do so responsibly, considering your resources, your time, your team, your talent. I want to show you how Undertale works, because this is an extremely efficient battle system that allows Toby and the game designers to be very expressive without dumping a ton of resources into each particular fight, okay? Here's one fight, one of the earliest fights from Undertale, with a character called Frogget, okay? And that was it. That's the entire fight. So I want to run through really quickly what happens here. You're walking through the overworld, and it's a fairly simple overworld, and suddenly you get approached by an enemy. What you need to do is you can choose to fight it, or you can choose to act. You can choose to compliment it when you act. You can choose to make it scared. You can do whatever you want. It seems like a threaten or compliment. That is essentially your move for the turn. You go then into a defensive phase, where the Frogget is going to attack you. This phase is represented by your heart in a tiny box, and this heart is something you control like a space shoot 'em up spaceship. You can use arrow keys to move the heart around, and all you need to do is dodge the white things, okay? You simply dodge the flies as they walk through this box, and that's it. As soon as you have made the other character happy or reluctant to fight you, you can click on Mercy to end the fight without anyone getting hurt, okay? So it's a very, very simple system. That's what I want to point out. Look at all of this, right? You can draw this heart, okay? You can absolutely draw this heart, and you could probably draw something equivalent to this heart in probably in about 30 seconds in Microsoft Paint or Paint.net, since you do need alpha. If you look at this right side, we have flies in a box, right? These flies are just about as simple as the heart. And this frogget on the left side is probably the most complicated part. I believe the head moves a little bit, so it's a little bit animated. And the frogget, the character design is certainly pretty interesting. But once you have the design in your head, it's not exactly a super complex shape to draw out there. So I just want you to take in how simple all of these game assets are. Compare it to a game that, like Legend of Zelda for the NES, the game that many of you are making right now. This is a game that usually, people consider to be a very low art asset heavy game, right? You've got a few sprites for your player character, a few stabbing sprites. You got a couple different weapons. You got some items that only have one frame of animation to any of them. And that's that, right? And this is vastly more complicated than what you see in this particular one battle. But consider this. However few resources a battle like this takes, it's very engaging and it's very expressive still, right? It's very creative that, I'm fighting a frog, so the little things that I should avoid, sure, they should be flies. That makes sense, right? Oh, it's a heart, right? My soul is represented by this heart. And of course, I need to keep my soul safe. It just all sort of makes sense. In other fights would be even more expressive and engaging. So let's take a look at this very interesting fight that many of you probably remember. This is with the greater... Is this the greater... I think this is a lesser dog you're fighting. Yeah, this is lesser dog. Okay, so you see we've got a fight here that's going on, and the defensive phase of this fight usually has some sort of dog jumping at you. And the dog, again, is very simple. I think it has 2 frames of animation. And if you think of this kind of defensive phase as its own little mini game, you could probably make this already with what you know this early on in the course in an hour, right? However, it's still very creative because you've got the dog here. It's a beautiful character design, and it's also doing something very unique. This battle is strange because your pet action causes the dog's head to continue to go upward. It even comes back into the screen if you continue to do it. And so, while this fight is extremely simple, and probably, once you knew what you wanted to do, pretty straightforward to create, it's still extremely creative. Right? And so I feel like most of the resources and time in most of these fights was not spent on creating the fight, but on just coming up with an interesting and engaging fight, the initial design idea. And that's exactly what you want as a small indie team. Here's another example it's a boss fight with a main character, Papyrus. So let's go ahead and watch this fight here. Something very interesting is going to happen to the style of gameplay in this game. Oh my gosh, I'm getting wrecked here by the technology. That's okay. We will persevere. Okay, let's fight Papyrus. Okay, so as this fight continues in the background, understand what just happened there. Because of how simple and abstract the battle system is, it was very easy for the designers to just, hey, we're going to have attack in this game that changes the color of your heart, and this is going to suddenly add gravity and platforming. So understand, we've now gone from the defensive phases of the game being a bullet hell shooter, where you're trying to dodge all these things coming at you, to a platformer game. And this, in any other game, would make no sense. Imagine if your sprite looked like a spaceship, and suddenly your spaceship changed color, and you had gravity, and the spaceship was like jumping off its back, right? It would make no sense. It would look uncanny. It's just like, what happened here? Is this a glitch? But because this game was kept so abstract, it's much, much, much easier to do these kind of crazy and unexpected things. Players will accept it much better. Okay, what about this? We have a bullet hell shooter that becomes a platformer, that becomes a rhythm game. If you've played this fight, let's see here. This makes me a little bit sad, simply because none of the rhythm game elements are really timed to the music, which seems like a missed opportunity. So you become a green heart, not a red or blue one, and you need to point your shield in the direction of incoming spears, I think. Right? Yes. Boom, 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 boom. This fight also builds up in a really great way. The first defensive phase is always just like 3 notes coming in one single direction, and you're set up to block in that direction. So even if you do nothing, you're going to block those attacks. And then it escalates, as just about any scenario should. Okay, we've got a platformer, bullet hell, we have rhythm game. How about a quiz show? I really, really like this encounter. It's very surprising. So the idea behind this fight is, let's turn your player character, which is usually a spaceship from a bullet hell shooter or a platforming character, into a cursor for a multiple choice quiz show game. And that's extremely creative on its own, but what this fight also does that's very impressive is it actually has a second character here who, and I didn't notice this for a long time, your friend here will actually give you the answers if you look closely. She's motioning B right now. And so that is an interesting way to use a battle system to endear the player to a character that I believe they've just met. So anyway, this is the first question that's impossible to answer. However, if you just follow your friend's suggestion, you'll get it right still. Anyway, okay, so here's the question. Right, there are so many different genres that the team were able to create. And if you look at each individual genre, it's exactly the kind of thing that you could probably create already, and you're only a week or two into this course. And so it's a very, very time investment light, many of these things. However, that's not to underestimate how difficult it can be to think up these incredible and diverse ideas and bring them all together in a really cohesive way. That is to say that one of the magical things about Undertale is what it chooses not to do. Okay? The dev team decided, you know what? We're not going to have this intricate battle system with tons of frames of animation and tons of different voice lines in the game and animations and stuff. we're going to have a very abstract battle system, but we're still going to make it meaningful because the time we save on asset production is going to be put into thinking up really interesting ideas and making each battle very unique and diverse. Okay? And it was an incredible, incredible idea. They were able to create a really unique and polished experience and surprising experience with a very small team and a very small budget. They kept things abstract. They were very pragmatic and efficient. They got a lot of diversity out of every single encounter, and they, I imagine, were able to iterate a lot and make it just fantastically fun. So consider this when you're making your next game. You are in exactly this situation. You don't necessarily have all of the time and money that you need. You don't necessarily have all the skills and resources and talent in every single area that you need. But if you make great, efficient, pragmatic choices, you can still have an extremely engaging experience and really work with your limitations instead of against them. Okay? Okay, so let's keep going. That is a talk on game design, and an interesting talk about the kind of intersection of game design and logistics/production that Toby Fox had going on for Undertale. Today, what I'd like to do is I'd like to finish off the toast system that we started yesterday. We need to talk about coupling of systems and decoupling and how you can do the latter with callbacks and the observer design pattern. We talked about singleton on Monday. We're going to talk today a little bit about the observer pattern. Then we're going to move into one of my favorite lectures on game design and interesting decisions. And then on Monday, as we get close to starting your P1 Gold, we're going to go on a lecture talk on the topic of guidance, which is easily my favorite lecture in the course. So please look forward to it. A few announcements. We had way too many last time. But due next Wednesday, and that's 7 days from now, right? It's coming up fast, is your P1 Alpha. However, there's another assignment due next Wednesday. Do you know which one it is? Chat, have you been paying attention? Have you been looking on the schedule, chat? Let us find out right now as everyone rushes to the schedule. Oh, there's something due Wednesday. You're right, you got it. P1 Research. P1 Research is a really, really cool it depends whether you like that kind of thing. I really enjoy it. It's an assignment where you need to essentially go out and play other games that are somewhat similar to the one you're working on right now. And you will be comparing the games to try and figure out, okay, what happens if you make a Zelda-like game but with larger rooms? That would be Star Tropics. How does that affect the feel of the game, the feel of exploration, the feel of combat, stuff like that? That's the kind of comparison you'll be doing. Should be a very short essay to write, and should be very satisfying too. It's a real chance to put on your game design cap very early on in the course. Okay, and then on next Wednesday, when P1 Alpha is due, remember, P1 Alpha does not need to have every task like perfect or bug-free or complete. You just need to have every task in the game. That's it. As long as you have the task in the game and it largely sort of works, it's not just a bare minimum implementation, you're going to get those points. That task will be considered existing in the game. You're going to get those points. We'll tell you about the bugs that we found with them, and you'll get that feedback. But you're not going to lose points, okay? P1 Gold is when everything needs to be finished and authentic and bug-free. You should look forward to getting some feedback on your P1 milestone probably by Sunday evening. We will be going through those submissions you did for P1 milestone. We'll be pointing out some bugs and getting you those results, okay? All right. So how is P1 Alpha going? I would like to just ask that. How are you feeling? How's the general energy level for you right now? I'm very, very curious. I always like to read the feedback so we can figure out what we want to do for next semester. The toughest thing is when you put out a game and you can see that people are playing it, but they're not making YouTube videos. They're not really showing you what the experience for them really is. So you have to just kind of guess. Not a good feeling. Okay. Okay. Starting to work on it today. That's a good idea. If you haven't started, please do so soon. I feel like people mouse and head us make a lot of things that make alpha easier. That's how it tends to go. A lot of enemies to add. Bomb took a lot of time. Yeah, that's tough. Bomb is the kind of thing that once you, I guess, kind of know what approach you should take, it's fairly easy. What I would do is I would probably just scan through all of the enemies and units that you know exist in the game. And you can do that by adding them to a static list in their start or on create and then removing them in their on destroy function. Maybe the has health component should do that. But just iterating through all of the enemies, check how close they are to the bomb when it goes off. And if it's close enough, deal some damage, right? Shouldn't be too bad. Hard figuring out internal interaction of multiple systems and choosing internal mechanics. Absolutely. Systems design can be very difficult. Could feedback be given on actual script code design, even if the implementation is working? Unfortunately, we don't have the budget to do that. We don't have the time to go into everyone's code and say, hey, this pattern that you are using is not ideal. We need to take away a few points for that. EECS 381 was, of course, famous for doing this. But they had, to my knowledge, fewer students, and they had a larger team, I think. Their course was also set up entirely to do exactly that, which is why it was such a fantastic and impactful course. Unfortunately, it's not the kind of thing that we can afford to do. Okay, I know web apps use analytics to get user feedback. What do game devs? Yeah, so Mixpanel is very typical in games. Unity has built-in analytics software. But we'll go over some of this, as Ish said, a little bit later in the course, because you'll get some extra credit for implementing it. Okay, so a last thing that I want to show you, which is kind of cool. You're all very aware of technical programming interviews. In fact, some of you might have done some recently or be scheduled to do some, as you are probably going to be looking for jobs soon. However, what about game design interviews? What do those look like? Did you even know those exist? This is the kind of game design interview question that you can get. It's a design test, and I believe this particular spec has you designing a game, a boss encounter for Disney Infinity. I think this boss encounter tasks you with designing a boss battle encounter with Ursula from The Little Mermaid. So how do you go about that? What are you trying to accomplish? And stuff like that. Okay. So yeah, it's a pretty interesting situation. And I can imagine having a basic drawing capability and skill could be very, very useful there. You'd be able to draw out example arenas. You'd be able to draw out example characters and attack patterns in a way that is very attractive. Okay. So anyway, I encourage you to look through this document. It's very interesting, and it can give you a little bit of a window into what game designers, what kind of challenges they face, and what situations they need to be able to address. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and finish up our toast system, okay? I want to show you essentially what we arrived at the end of last lecture on Monday. So let's go ahead and show that. Okay. Come on, Unity. Let's go. Come on. Hey, we got a lecture going here. Come on. Got to start. Okay. All right, so we got our bird flapping, Flappy Bird. And we're going through a pipe, and when we get a point, you know, it does nothing because it's not our high score. We fly through, and let's see here. Uh-oh, is it gonna come? Is it gonna come in and show us? Uh-oh. Oh, actually, it's not because I took that function. I took that feature out. Okay. So here is a way that we could implement our technology into the rest of the game. So if we look at our tech, we have the toast manager from last time. If we go into that toast manager, we're going to see our public API. The only way it is possible to send a toast in this game is this toast function, public static void toast. It takes a message, puts it on the queue, and then it runs that cool little animation. However, no system is actually using this API. None of our external code base is using the system's API, so we're going to change that. We'll go into our game manager, and we're going to find the code that basically sets our score, okay? So here it is. Here's the bird scored function, okay? And this function is always going to be called to update the score. And so what we can do here what we can do is let's get a variable here. Hey, new score equals score plus 1. Okay, and what we can do is we can go, hey, toast manager. Why don't, whenever the player scores, send a toast? Okay, we're gonna be like, hey, new high score, and we'll send in that new score. And we should actually make better use of that that new variable there. There we go. Okay, so that's one way to do it. But I want you to notice something here. This is going to work, and I'll show you working in a sec. But what I want you to notice is that we've actually done something kind of bad, okay? This is not a good approach because we now have a game manager class that is central to our game, right? But this game manager class is now coupled. It is now coupled to the existence of a toast manager. I want you to imagine this. If we take this game manager and put it into a new game, it won't work because this game manager absolutely requires that there exists the toast manager in that code base. But if you think about that, it makes no sense at all. Why should our game, our core game, not be able to run if we simply don't have a little messaging system that pops in? Ideally, we want this game manager system to be able to run and do its job and survive, even if we don't have the toast manager system in the game. We might want to take this system and move it to another project, but we can't do it without also bringing in the toast manager, but we might not want it in that other game, right? And so what we have here is an instance of something you've probably heard of. It's called hard coupling. It's a coupling between two systems where essentially you have a dependency. This game manager system cannot exist without the toast manager. And that's not good. That's not good. We're creating spaghetti this way, okay? Dependencies everywhere. They are hard dependencies, so the world falls apart if we do not make those dependencies work. And so we want to avoid this situation if possible. Let me show you that this is going to work. Okay, so there's a question in the chat of, okay, when do we call toastmanager.toast versus toastmanager.instance? And if we've set things up properly, the latter, isn't even possible to use. Toastmanager.instance is not possible to use because it is a private static instance variable that is used to establish the singleton pattern, but should not be used by any external system, okay? So let's go ahead and fly through here, and we'll do our toast. Hey, there we go. All right, it worked. New high score, 1. All right, and I'll just to answer that question really quickly. If we go to toast manager and we look at the instance variable that you're talking about, toast manager.instance is not a way that you can interface with this system because it's private. Let me prove this to you. Toast manager dot instance, so that instance doesn't exist. We got to instantiate. But the only API, if we look through all of this, that we can actually use on the system is toast right here. And that's what we want. We don't want external systems getting in and messing with our internal state. That could cause all sorts of crazy, unexpected things to happen. So the main idea is you build a system where it's very, very easy to understand and constrained how other systems use it, how other pieces of the code base use it. Who's done their taxes? Has anyone done their taxes? Right? So when you go to do your taxes, you have to fill out some forms, and these forms are in a way kind of complicated and can be confusing. There's a lot of pressure on the IRS to keep these forms simple so that people can understand them. Because if these forms, which if you think about it are literally just an API call into the federal government, if these forms get too complicated, then no one can use these darn APIs. How am I supposed to do my taxes if it takes me a month just to figure out and understand what each box means? And so you really want to make it super simple. You want to make the API for any system as simple as possible so that people can use that system and not get themselves into trouble, okay? So that's why you use things like the private modifiers. That's why you generally don't want to use the public variable. We do have to do it here, otherwise we can't configure an animation curve in the inspector. But Okay, that's the general philosophy. Okay, I've droned on for too long. This is bad, all right? This is bad. This is hard coupling. You have a system game manager that literally has a reference to it, to another system, which is the toast manager, okay? And so, what do we want to do here? Well, ideally, the toast manager doesn't care about the existence. Sorry, the game manager does not care at all about the toast manager, okay? So let's go ahead and get rid of this line of code right now. So the question might be, well, okay, but how are we going to make our toasts work? Well, what you can do is something like this. You can use the observer pattern. You can say, okay, the game manager is going to let other systems know when a point is scored. But it doesn't care what other systems know. It doesn't care which systems those are, and it doesn't care if there actually are any other systems observing the game manager. So here's what we're going to do, okay? We're going to use something called a delegate, and we're going to establish a callback. If you've ever dealt with event-driven programming, then this might seem very similar to you. So what we'll do is create a callback. Let's call this, delegate. Let's call this a void. It's going to be some function that returns void, and it's going to be a function that has the parameter of an int, okay? Int. All right, I think that's all we really need. Let me see here. Oh, we need to provide the return type. Okay. So what we've just done is we've actually created a new callback type. Essentially, we've defined a type for a function. Now we can take this delegate and we can use it as a type to say, hey, we're going to create a callback that is going to be called on point scored, okay? And we want this to be very visible and easy to access. So we're going to make it static, and we're going to make it public, okay? Okay. So this was probably a little bit confusing to you. Oops, I need to make this public as well, this data type. Cool, there we go. All right. Public int, uh-oh, it's complaining. What are you complaining about? Identifier expected. Oh, this needs to be within the class, my bad. Okay. Okay. Or is that right? Int I, is that what we need? Oh, there we go. Can we keep it outside of the class? That would be better. Yeah, I think the compiler will be fine with that. Okay, so what we've done here is a little bit confusing maybe, but what we've done is we've created essentially a type of function, a new data type that we can use. This data type is literally a function that returns void and takes an integer, okay? It is a variable that can store a reference to any function with those two properties. It takes an integer and it returns nothing. Since this is just a data type, we can use it to create a new variable, okay? And we do it here, public static void param int on point scored. This is an interesting and special variable though, because it allows you to register functions on it. So we can do things like, well, I don't know, we can do things like this if we wanted to. We could say, well, actually, let's save that for later. This is a function variable, and we need to choose when these functions stored on it is going to execute. So we'll say, hey, on point scored. Okay, when does any function registered on this delegate need to be run? Well, it's going to be run in this set bird scored function, right? So we set the score, and then we need to alert all the other functions, is not equal to no, that there's a new score. Oops. I don't think I'm explaining this super well right now, but the basic idea is we've just established an event. Okay, we have a delegate here that other systems can register their own functions on, and if there are any delegates registered for us, then we need to alert those functions on point scored, and we send those functions the new score value, okay? I think it'll be more clear when we actually use this in just a moment. But in other words, Game Manager now provides a service to other systems. Other systems in other parts of the code base can say, hey, Game Manager, I want you to let me register a callback on this event, and I want to get my function called whenever the bird scores a point. So in order to actually use this, we'll create a new kind of intermediary system really quickly. It's going to be called the message manager. Let's go ahead and create this. Create empty. This is going to be called the message manager. And we'll go ahead and put it, oh, we're not going to parent it. We'll put it up here. We'll call this, we'll create a new script real quick. Message manager. This system is going to be responsible for sending the player messages. Whatever messages that it decides are important. And it's going to use the delegate we just set up, the callback that we just set up in order to do its job. Okay, so we need a new function. Let's call this on player scored. Okay, it needs to take an integer, new score, and this function is never ever going to be called unless we actually hook it up. So in our start function, we're going to go game manager dot on point scored. There's the function. There's the event we just set up, the callback, and we're going to register our on player scored function with it. Okay. So what's going to happen now is whenever the game manager detects that it has scored a point, it's going to run this function for us, okay? And what do we want to do in this function? Well, we want to use the toast manager. Let's toast with the message new score, and then we got our new score value here, okay? So very, very, very simple system. And that's essentially it. There's a little bit more cleanup we could do because if we run the game multiple times, we don't want to create a new message manager every time. But what's going to happen is we play the game like normal. The message manager says, hey, game manager, if you ever score a point, go ahead and run my function for me. The game manager is totally fine with doing that. And what's amazing here, this is the takeaway. The game manager can now help the message manager do its job, but the game manager is not coupled to the message manager, and the game manager is not coupled to the toast manager. So even though everything here is going to work, the game manager is now decoupled. It has been de-spaghettied, okay? You will not find a single reference in the code for the game manager that refers to the toast manager. Toast manager, never heard of it, right? Or the message manager, never heard of it, okay? And as a result, we can now take this game manager system and we can move it to another project, and we don't have to worry about any dependencies. It's really, really great. Okay, so let's make sure this is going to work for us, though, just to be sure. Why do we need a toast manager and a toast manager separately? They're the same thing. I'm not sure what you mean. Can you refine the question? Okay, so let's go ahead and play through, and we'll make sure it's working the way we kind of expect. And there we go. It works just like we expect. Isn't that cool? The game manager basically provides a service that allows any other function in the entire game, any other system, to basically get events from it. Okay. In other words, it is now possible for other systems to observe the game manager, but the game manager doesn't really care who's observing it, doesn't care who's listening, if anyone, to get information from it. So, in other words, we've used the observer pattern to decouple some of our systems from each other, which is pretty neat. We've reduced the number of dependencies in our project, we've reduced their severity, and actually in the future, we're going to show you an incredible pattern that actually takes this to the next level. Because as you notice, we do have a message manager, and the message manager is coupled to the toast manager and the game manager. In other words, this message manager cannot exist on its own without these two systems also being present in the code base. And we can actually even get rid of that spaghetti using an event pattern called a pub/sub. Using an event bus. And that's code that I will be showing you and giving you. That's a design pattern and a really powerful technique that I'll be giving you in, I think, a couple of weeks, just in time for you to use it on Project 2. It's really, really great. Do we have some questions? Yes, that's right. The message manager's purpose is to decouple the game manager from the toast manager. okay? These two systems are really, really important. Ideally, we don't want them to know about each other because we don't want them to have those dependencies or we can't reuse them, and we start to get spaghetti, and it becomes nasty. The biggest issue with our project right now, after making this improvement, the biggest remaining issue is that the message manager is now coupled to game manager and toast manager. The message manager cannot exist without these two other systems also being present. And we're going to give you another design pattern called pubsub in the future that eliminates this dependency, okay? Which is super, super cool and very, very useful. Anyway, what you can do is you can Google observer pattern if you want to get more examples of this powerful pattern working. This is a really, really great system, for instance, if you want to do UI, because essentially you could give your player, or you could give your has health component a way for other systems to listen in. You could give them a callback so that, hey, I can know when my health has changed. And for instance, the UI could grab a reference to the player and could say, hey, player.getComponent has health, register a callback for me because I want to update my UI. I want to know if your health ever changes because I need to draw it. I need to change the number of hearts I have. I need to change the number in Metroid that represents Samus's HP, okay? Anyway. Yes, that's it. You're correct. Game Manager calls on point scored. Game Manager calls this delegate, which is basically a list of functions. It calls all those functions right here. It says, hey, if some functions have been registered for me, if we have other systems that are wanting to get this event, then execute their functions, give them the event, and send them into that function the new score, okay? All right. So let's go ahead and let's go ahead and continue because I want to go ahead and get to the fun stuff for today, which is going to be the game design lecture. So we'll go ahead and get to that. Game design 101. And we'll get a little bit into this, and then we'll take our halfway break, okay? Yes, that's right. So on point scored is a delegate, which is a list of functions, okay? That means that you can have 100, you can have 1,000 functions be registered on that delegate. Essentially what that would mean is you've got 1,000 different systems that all want to know when a point has been scored. And they want to have their function be run and given that new score, okay? And that's the beauty of it. Game Manager can now service thousands of different systems without actually knowing what they are. So there's no coupling at all, which is super, super cool. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about game design. So I want to get some thoughts from you, chat. What is a game? It's an interesting question. It's one that gets asked at Wolverine Soft a lot. And while it might not be the most impactful question, it is an interesting one. We should think about it. What is a game to you? What does a game mean? Or in other words, how do you know when you're playing a game versus, for instance, doing some homework on the computer? Your homework uses the computer. Your games probably use the computer too, if you play any PC or Mac games. But how do you know when you're playing a game versus doing homework or just wasting time? Or maybe you're wasting time by playing a game. A game is fun, right? But is that really true? Has anyone in the chat played a game that maybe wasn't so fun? Are all games fun? Are all games meant to be fun? A thing you can play for fun. Can you think of any games that were designed to make you uncomfortable? To make you not enjoy it? Tic-tac-toe isn't exactly fun, right? That's a good point. The right amount of challenging. Have you ever played a game maybe like Journey or Flower that, doesn't have a significant challenge, but it's still very fun and you enjoy it, right? Is difficulty something you need for a game? Doki Doki Literature Club, horror games, surprising games, right? I want to play something with specific rules. Okay, well, what about an exam? An exam has very specific rules. Is that a game? Well, you're even scored on it. So how is an exam not a game, right? So anything which gives a crafted experience. So would you say that going to a play is a game? Because that's definitely a handcrafted, very meticulously planned experience for you to have. But would you call it a game? So what I'm trying to get at here is that it's really hard to pin down what a game actually is. And there's enormous debate over this that frankly is a bit unwarranted in my opinion. It's an interesting question to ask yourselves, but maybe not a super impactful one, because it tends to go in circles, and at the end of the day you're left with a definition that isn't super useful. So if you go into the dictionary, you'll find that Merriam-Webster thinks a game is an activity engaged in for diversion or amusement. Okay? Yeah, it seems like a standard enough definition, though we'll see this definition isn't particularly accurate, I think. If you ask Tracy Fullerton, who's a professor at USC's #1 game design program, she says, a game is a closed formal system that engages players in structured conflict and resolves its uncertainty in an unequal outcome. Which is an interesting and very academic and very formal definition. I can't help but read this, though, and think, like, okay, like, what about draws, though? Like, games end in draws all the time, right? Football games don't end in draws, but many do, so it doesn't make a ton of sense. It's cool, though. It's useful. A game is a series of meaningful choices. Sid Meier, this might be my favorite, personally. Sid Meier is a proud alum of U of M. I remember, I think back in, like, 2012, I had lunch with him, actually. He really likes Olga's. A very cool guy. But a series of meaningful choices, okay? You might think of games that don't have a ton of decisions to make in them. But this is going to be a really, really useful definition for us, as we'll get to in a sec. So here's the thing. What is a game might be a less interesting question to us than what makes a good game. But even then, when you think of, okay, what does good mean? What does good mean? Does that mean fun? Okay, does that mean, it's like a Nintendo game. It's Mario, woohoo, you're jumping around, you're seeing stuff, you're saying hi to people. Or Kirby, right? You're seeing wonderful visuals and character designs just making you happy, right? Or, maybe good, and we got Reggie here with the famous phrase, if it's not fun, why bother? And that's pretty much Nintendo in a nutshell. However, maybe being fun isn't the most important thing. Maybe it's all about being memorable. Because there's certainly games out there that a lot of people would not describe as particularly fun, okay? Has anyone played Getting Over It? That is a game that certainly can be fun for certain tastes, but is pretty much guaranteed to make many of its players a little bit frustrated, okay, at times. Another example is a game like Heavy Rain, which is an interesting kind of Quantic Dream game. This screenshot right here shows a scenario in which your task is to make your character cut their finger off within about 10 minutes. You have to do this as part of a challenge, or a serial killer is going to basically drown your kid. It's a very stressful situation, and I think a lot of people wouldn't describe this as fun, but certainly very memorable if you played this game. Jason, yes, that's what it came from. Sean. Okay, so, but what about poignant or painful? Can a good game be one that makes you feel, things or experience things that you haven't really experienced before? A game like Mainichi, a game that kind of puts you in the shoes of a trans woman who is, has a lot of challenges in her life. This game was made in order for Maddie Bryce to share the painful points of her life and her everyday difficult decisions with her friends, who she couldn't express those things in a way that was satisfying without using a game. The game medium allowed her to do that really effectively. So, not all games are meant to be fun, something we'll talk about when we study games as art a bit later. But are these games good? I think a lot of people might say yes, because they accomplish what they're trying to do. But maybe what we can definitely say is that all of these games are very engaging, okay? And that might be more useful to us in this course than the question of what makes a game, what makes a good game, The question is, what makes an engaging game? And that's what we tend to focus on in this course. This is what a lot of your grading criteria, as far as game design, kind of emphasizes. Okay, how can you make a game that is going to get people to play it and keep playing it? How do you make an engaging game? So we'll return to this quote. A game is a series of meaningful choices, okay? And so naturally, the first thing that we're going to focus on when it comes to game design in this course is we're going to focus on the idea of interesting decisions, okay? We're also, later on in the course, we're going to focus on a topic called player guidance. I think that's going to be Monday or maybe Wednesday. How do you make sure that players aren't confused by your game? We're going to talk about juice and how do you make your game feel alive and super interactive a little bit later. We're also going to talk about game feel, okay? Today, though, it's all about interesting decisions. How do you make interesting decisions? Well, it turns out a big part of that is adding consequence to those decisions, surprise and novelty, and also having a temporal aspect to them. In other words, decisions that are relevant in the short term, medium term, and the long term, okay? So before we get into this, I want to take a break, okay? We're going to have 5 minutes here, and we're going to let you use the restroom and do whatever you want. Ask some questions, maybe on the observer pattern, and we're going to turn the music back on, okay? So I'll see you in 5. Okay, go ahead and ask any questions. Yes, this is Nier Automata. Nier Automata is also a very interesting game. It was a kind of like Undertale. It's an example of a AAA game that faced a lot of limitations. They did not have a huge budget for this game, and the way that it's structured kind of reveals this fact, but it also masks this fact pretty well. So you get like a 30-hour game on a very small budget, and it's very interesting. So a AAA game refers usually to kind of the scale and budget and scope of the game. So a AAA game might be considered to be something like The Sims 4, which had, I think it had like 300 to 400 people on it, from in many different departments. A game like Undertale would be considered definitively indie. You had like one person heading it, and then maybe they commissioned a few people, a few teammates to help them finish up the art, finish up the programming and stuff. A AA game would be like something you see at nearby Stardock in Plymouth, who has like, I think like 20 to 30 game developers working on smaller scale projects. Definitively not indie, but definitely not at the scale of like a first party AAA studio. So I saw that events are kind of like the observer pattern with less parts. So events typically use a system like an event bus that is explicitly made to allow communication between systems without those systems actually knowing each other. And so it is a little bit more involved to set up, I think, than the observer pattern, but it tends to be more reusable and a little bit more flexible. Pub sub. So that's the major difference. You can sort of think of observer as an easier to use, well, not easier to use, an easier to set up version of pub sub and events, but with a little bit less flexibility and a little bit less spaghettification that happens. They are very similar though, and I think once you understand and get a little bit of experience with Observer, it'll be very easy to go to using the event bus, using the pub sub approach, the event approach. Yeah, I'm a big fan of getting over it personally. My tastes are that I play every game I buy on hard, go to the hardest difficulty right off the bat. As it turns out, a lot of game designs really shine when you go to the hardest difficulty because you need to utilize every mechanic and every tool to their fullest extent. You need to understand every game mechanic in order to get through the challenges. On easier difficulties in many games, what you find is that you can brute force your way through most situations. We'll talk about that a little bit. RPGs are particularly vulnerable to the brute force approach. The problem is when you have players that brute force your levels and designs, suddenly all of the intricacies and nuances that make game mechanics interesting don't matter. You can find one tool, one item, one weapon, one technique, and you can use it to just bulldoze your way through the entire game. Everything becomes very rote as a result. On the hardest difficulties, you cannot clear any situation unless you use the perfect tool for that situation, unless you really understand what the perfect tool is and how to use it. As a result, you get a lot of extra game time out of that game, and as long as you can deal with the frustration of being punished for being even slightly incorrect in your understanding and execution, you're going to have a very engaging time, I find. A really good example of this, and I'm sorry, I'm droning on because of what Ultra Super Bob said, but it's an important point, I think. A game like Alien Isolation is not the same game at all on easy mode versus nightmare. On the hardest difficulty in that game, you absolutely must understand how the alien works and when it can sense you and how it senses you and what's the perfect time to move on and make a dash for it. What are all the tools you can use? And it completely changes that game. Suddenly you find yourself almost a scientist in a zoo. Like you're studying exactly how this entity works and what makes it do certain things, and you die a ton, but you're also learning and really getting a close look at how these systems work. And that's, as a game designer, that is what interests me the most these days. Yeah, Alien Isolation is a very scary game. And part of that fear is that you just can't quite predict what's coming next. You have your doubts about whether you can make it and when the alien's going to show up, but you can never quite pin down exactly what's going to happen. So, kind of like Spelunky, you can't just memorize your way through a level. You have to very dynamically react to a situation, which puts a lot of pressure on your understanding of the mechanics. Okay, let's keep going. What does it mean to be interesting or meaningful? That's a really hard question, right? So let's explore it a little bit. Let's get some concrete examples going. Maybe that'll help us figure out what it means to be engaging or have an interesting decision. What on earth is an interesting decision? Okay, question for you. Chat, question. Did you enjoy the following game or did you not? Did you find yourself engaged by the following game? There we go. Did it engage you, chat? I want to know. Heck yes, 110%. I was super engaged by this. I think I'm being trolled a little bit because the historical answer is not really, right? Let's go ahead, but you're invested in it, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and do a little game, okay? I have two columns here. On the left, we have a column, an area, where we're going to put games with fewer decisions, trivial decisions, and more boring decisions. These tend to be less engaging games. On the right, we're going to put games that have more decisions, impactful decisions, more interesting ones to make. And while you might not agree with this, chances are the summary, the crowd is going to be able to categorize these. And typically, the crowd tends to think that the vanilla version of Rollerball, it doesn't really hold your attention for 30 minutes, okay? There's not a ton of things you can do in most of these stages besides collect the spheres and manage your jumps, right? Compare it to a game that you might have heard of, an old game created by Mark Cerny, who is a famous architect of the PS4. This is a game called Marble Madness, and we can actually play this online. I'm going to try to do it. It ran really slowly last time we did this. We'll see if we can make it happen. Maybe I should try running this in my Chrome window. Chrome tends to be a little bit faster with its JavaScript. Okay, so is it gonna run? Downloading. Oh, it got rid of my webcam. That's fine. It's fine though. Okay, here we go. Oh gosh, that looks weird, doesn't it? Let's move this over here. All right, I apologize for how weird this looks. Insert coin, player 1. Uh-oh. Hello? Ugh. Any luck? Are we back? Are we back? Can you see me, everyone? Yeah, sorry, that didn't work. So what we're probably gonna do instead is we're gonna watch some footage of it. Here we go. Here's Marble Madness. Pretend I'm playing. Okay. We usually have a student come up and play these games, so I'm a little bit sad. That's a pandemic trolling us a bit. Okay, any audio? Here we go. Think about comparisons to Rollerball. All right. So, team, you just saw some footage of the classic game Marble Madness. How does it strike you, right? Like, this is in many ways very similar to the rollerball games that you created. However, many people report this to be a little bit more engaging, something you want to play again multiple times, try and get better, right? Discussions. Usually during our non-pandemic semesters, we have one student talking and trying to get through it, and people will say, like, we'll start shouting out strategies. You don't really get that too much with the vanilla rollballs. So why do you think this game tends to be more engaging? What are the decisions that you see in this game that you don't see in Rollerball vanilla version? There are no yellow cubes to collect. That's a bit of a bummer, isn't it? But okay, so you've got obstacles and interesting parts of the level to interact with, right? So you've got a rival ball, right? That actually like fights with you and tries to block you. Did you see that? That's the craziest part of this level for me. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm not the only ball in this universe. Imagine the lore questions that this brings up. Why are the balls fighting? You know? We've got leeches that have these really crazy patterns where they jump up into the air, but you'll be fine if you can stay moving. You've got parts of the level that rotate and block you for a while, trapping you with the leeches, and you have to get through them. Did you notice the fall damage? Right? You have to be careful about your jumps. Otherwise, you'll get stunned a bit. There are multiple paths, as we're saying in the chat. There are different strategies. There are different enemies. You're timed, right? You can't just dilly-dally. You need every move you take, every decision you make has some consequence, right? And so if you compare this to Rollerball, you can see there's a lot more going on. There's a lot more that a player from moment to moment would need to think about in order to come out successful. And as a result, many people tend to prefer this kind of game, okay? Certainly the students historically do when they play it in lecture. Here's another question. What about poker, the game of poker, right? You've all played the game of poker. In fact, there's probably, I was in the UP actually over the break, and we were in, we went to a casino, and there was poker being played there. A lot of people love poker. They play it all the time in person. They play it online. This is a popular game, right? In fact, I've got a student working on a Zynga poker right now, which is really cool. This is a popular game. And if you've played poker, what are the kind of decisions that come up when you play this game? Can anyone remember? Think back to the last time they played poker. What do you need to think about? What do you got, chat? What kind of decisions are in poker? Should you fold, right? Should you fold? Should you check? Should you bet? And what's interesting about poker is that there aren't a ton of different decisions, right? There are only a handful of decisions to make in this game, but the decisions that you do make are super impactful, right? No one wants to lose money. And it's hard to make those decisions, isn't it? It's really hard to know, right, whether you should fold, whether you should bet. It's a game that relies very strongly on limiting information. You get some partial information, and you have to try and weigh your odds. Okay, I've got these cards. I think my opponents might have these cards. My opponent is playing like they have a super crazy good hand. They must be very confident, but they could be bluffing, right? So maybe I should fold right now before I get bulldozed, or maybe I should call their bluff and I should keep raising, you know? So there are few decisions to make, but they're very impactful and they're very interesting because they're hard to make. They're not trivial decisions at all. Okay, and this is an extremely popular game and very successful, right? You've got countless dollars on the line in very high profile matches that people love to watch and keep track of. So this game's going in the right column for sure. I want you to compare this with a game that also has very few decisions. Okay, has anyone played the classic heart-stopping game of War? Has anyone played a War, the card game? I think there's a mobile game called Game of War out there. I hope they managed to do a better job than the card designers of this game did. Has anyone played a War? Is this anyone's favorite game? It's a 10 out of 10 masterpiece. Anyone? Oh heck yeah! This I think was my first card game back in the day. And it says something about the psychology, I think, of young children that I did manage to enjoy this game quite a bit when I was younger. This is a game, if you don't know, where you cut your deck in two. Okay, you got a deck of cards. You give half the deck to one player. You have half the deck to another, and at the same time, you flip over a card. Whichever card is more valuable, a higher value card, that player wins both of the cards that were just played by each player, okay? And they put that back into their deck. They shuffle it back into their deck, okay? And that's the entire game, okay? That's the entire darn game. In fact, I think I said that this game has few decisions. In reality, it only has one. It's the decision on whether or not to play. Because as soon as you decide to play War, your fate is sealed, okay? It's the world's slowest random number generator. You simply put over a card, and see who wins each hand until someone runs out of cards. It's really exciting if two players put down cards of the same value, because then it gets crazy. The next thing you do is you flip over two more cards, and whoever wins there gets all the cards currently in the center, currently in play, okay? And that's the most exciting moment in the entire game, aside from when you finish and you can go do something else. Okay. It was rigged from the start. Here's a hard one. Has anyone played Temple Run? Temple Run is a pretty prolific mobile game series that features you running really, really fast down a hallway, collecting stuff, making jumps, sliding, and choosing which way to go. Okay, this one's probably going to be a little bit controversial. What do you think? Is this going in our more engaging column or our less engaging? Yeah, I think I might be ahead of most players, of most of our stream audience right now, because it takes a little while to get these answers. But what do you think, chat? Do you think it's is this engaging, or is this less engaging? Played for 1 whole year back in high school, definitely engaging, more engaging, spent hours on it, right? So this is a really engaging game. It does very well, right, on the mobile audience. However, if you think about it, this is another game that has not a ton of decisions, right? You want to jump? You want to go slide? You want to go left or right? That's pretty much it. However, and these decisions at first glance might not seem like they're all that interesting, right? And so you might say, well, it should probably go in the less engaging column, but it still engages. Why? Well, as it turns out, even small numbers of decisions that are very simple can be very, very interesting and engaging if you have to make them quickly, okay? The time with which you have to make a decision can turn a trivial decision into a super interesting one that you have to make really fast, right? Think of it this way. If you took Temple Run and you slowed it down to 1/5 of the speed that it usually runs at, what would happen to the game? You would have the same decisions, there wouldn't be very many of them, and they would be of the same complexity, but suddenly making those decisions would be trivial because, oh, it's just, yeah, okay, I jump. Like there's a gap. I can see the gap, so I jump, right? That's not an interesting decision at all. It's just the thing you do. It's trivial. It's easy to make. However, because of the speed of this game, your brain is like, oh, what do I do? Okay, that's a gap. Oh, all right, I jumped. Okay, what's next? Right? You're constantly moving on to the next thing, and right, and suddenly, it's not a trivial decision anymore because you have to make it so darn fast. So anyway, that goes over there. No Man's Sky, right? No Man's Sky, and I'm talking about the launch version, not the more recent versions, which are very different. This game is really well known, and for good reasons and for bad ones. There are really interesting documentaries online that can be very fun to watch, discussing what happened with this game. But we're going to go ahead and put it there preemptively, and I'll show you why. Okay, this game was advertised as a procedurally generated universe. And so you could go to millions of different planets and you could find the different things that take place there, right? A true everything game where it's just infinite content and, it's just going to be an incredible time. Yeah, that never works out, right? At least not from the get-go. And so here is essentially what people thought of the game when it came out. We'll watch. This is one of my favorite videos of the course. I think you'll understand why in just a moment. So this is sorry. Sorry, this isn't my favorite video, but it's still a great one. We're going to watch it. This is a great kind of essayist, a game design essayist, Joseph Anderson, going over briefly what the problem with No Man's Sky is, at least the base version.
What do you do in No Man's Sky? I've been to hundreds of planets spread over more than 100 systems, so I can objectively answer this question with, you go to planets and hope they look pretty. If they do, you stay for a while and look around. If they don't, you leave and fly to the next one and hope it looks pretty. That's it. That's the game. The thing is, though, you might not realize that at first, because there are aliens to meet and speak to, there are resources to mine and hoard, you can craft some things, discover blueprints for tech upgrades, scan wildlife on planets, you can catalog and name discovered alien animals and plants yourself. But the more you play, the more you realize there isn't a point to any of this. Farming resources for crafting should lead to something, but it doesn't. You can save up money to buy a new ship, but aside from looks, they're all identical. The only difference between each one is the amount of inventory slots they provide, which clumps in with all of the other upgrades to result in this almost catch-22 statement. You find and collect things in No Man's Sky in order to make it easier for you to find and collect things in No Man's Sky. Exosuit upgrades, they make it so you can survive longer in harsh environments and move faster in order to collect things. What do you use those collected things on? To make the upgrades so you can survive longer and move faster. Multi-tool upgrades, well, they make it so your mining beam can be used more efficiently to suck up resource nodes, which you then use to make your mining beam be more efficient at sucking up resource nodes. Starship upgrades, well, you get the idea, and it may sound like I'm exaggerating, but I'm really, truly not. There are no big, interesting discoveries anywhere in the game. There are no cool events, no complicated ruins or randomly generated dungeons. There are alien settlements on planets, but they're all the same pre-made collection of buildings that have one alien in it. Never two, only one.
So this was a game that promised a lot of content, but the thing and decisions, right? An endless universe of decisions on things to explore and interact with and do. However, it turned out that while there were a billion decisions to make, the large majority of them weren't all that interesting. Okay, so quantity is not enough. You need quality as well. And I just have to show you this this next GIF. I think it's coming up here. Is it here? I don't think. Is this it? No, that's the Joseph Anderson video. Let me. Here it is. Hopefully Baidu will play it for us. Nope. Rest in peace. Let me go ahead and find the clip for us. This guy. Okay. So here we go. Here's one of my favorite clips in the course.
Welcome to Jurassic Park.
Okay, great. Yes, let's get back to it. Yeah, people were promised a world of endless possibilities, but got a world that was endless but did not have many possibilities. Okay, let's keep going. The new version, the modern version of No Man's Sky, I hear is much better, filled with interesting content you can discover, handmade, crafted content. Okay, here's a GIF that kind of gets into this and kind of summarizes the whole thing. I found this a while ago, and it's very funny. These are a bunch of games that have essentially had themselves streamlined to the basis of, oh, all the decisions are gone and no decision matters, right? You're racing in Mario Kart and you have the armored vehicle, so you win. You're playing Punch Out and you get help, so you just win. There's no challenge. There's no decisions to make. There's no limitations. Pong, right? This is Pong. You're this paddle right over here. The game is totally ended. Okay, maybe it's a little bit not the most sensitive GIF, but it does get the point across. So the question is, okay, interesting decisions are really important. You don't just want to have a lot of decisions. You want those decisions to be as engaging as possible. So how can we create interesting ones? It's a pretty intimidating question, and it's one that you're going to invest a lot of time and experimentation in this course. To create engaging decisions, one way you can do this is to add consequence, right? We already looked at several examples where, well, it doesn't really matter what kind of decision you make because they all end up in a victory screen, right? Here are some interesting things to think about. When it comes to the real life, you can see this playing out. Monopoly situations. A lot of people aren't particularly happy with their internet service in the US and parts of the US. And what you'll often see cited is, hey, there's a monopoly. So the local provider, maybe it's only Comcast that serves my area, they are the only option, right? There's no decision to make here for me as a user of the internet. And for Comcast, well, there's no decision to make either. They can innovate and invest and make a really great experience for their users, new technologies and all that, or they can not do that and save money, and there's no difference. There's very little difference. It just doesn't affect their situation because there's no other option, right? That's why a monopoly is so nasty. Speaking of Monopoly, the board game Monopoly, right? When you play the board game Monopoly, you get handed a bunch of this Monopoly money. And that is a draw of many people who play the game, right? It's kind of neat to be dishing out $100 bills. However, a lot of people don't really like this game. They play this game for a little while, they kind of bounce off of it, in part because the stakes of the game aren't really there. In direct contrast with a game like poker, right, or gambling, right? When you're playing with Monopoly money, the consequences aren't really there in the same way that if you're playing with actual money, right? These chips represent actual tangible money. They represent time from your life, right? And so people will be very engaged by casino games, and that can be good and that can be very bad too. We've seen in many ways designs that use this approach can be a bit predatory. But the consequence is the important takeaway here, and there's a very big difference in consequences between Monopoly money and you're playing a game that has real stakes, right? This is something that you see when it comes to, unfortunately, Congress. So if you go to C-SPAN and you watch anyone presenting, just kind of during a normal, everyday, average day, what you'll very often see is a representative that is talking in an empty room. And ignore the meme. The memes are kind of funny. But the thing is, they speak very often to an empty room because there's no bill being voted on that day, right? And so, there's no real reason for other representatives to be there and be listening. And so as a result, of the lack of consequence, no one shows up to these. It's just someone speaking to thin air, getting some video clips for their ads and stuff like that. It's kind of disappointing in a way. Here is a stock photo of a meeting from Pixabay, okay? This is a hilarious stock photo for a number of reasons, but one of which is this is clearly the most engaging meeting that I've ever seen in my life. How many of you have been at a meeting that looked this active and engaging, and everyone's happy to be there? There's some real business going down in this meeting, This is often not how it plays out. If you get into, when you get into industrial life, or even if you go to a club meeting, you become an officer of a club, in many situations, the meeting is just you're sitting at the back of it, you're just kind of maybe nodding if you're really engaged. But otherwise, there's very little consequence for you sitting in the back of a room and wondering to yourself, why am I here? This meeting topic has nothing to do with me or my department in this team or club. And so why am I here, There's no consequence, and so it's not engaging. All right, let's keep going. All right, so add consequence. This is one of the most famous stages in gaming, okay? This is from Crash Bandicoot, which you actually saw not too long ago during one of our mini lectures. However, why is this one of the most famous levels in gaming? It's not because there's a box here, and it's not because there's a Wumpa Fruit and you get to play as Crash Bandicoot. This is one of the most famous levels in all of gaming because of this, okay? I mean, look at this guy's emotion. And it's caused by this, okay? Consequence, right, is a way that you could spice up levels. In this case, the consequential element is that of time. Okay, you have a very limited amount of time that you can spend in this particular area of this particular path, or the boulder is going to catch up to you and crush you. And because of that, what would ordinarily be a dead simple level, an extremely boring, uneventful level, is turned into one of the most memorable and exciting and terrifying levels in gaming. You get to this stage, you can barely see what's coming ahead of you. You know that you can't hang around for any amount of time. So if you run by this box, you can't go back. So you quickly dash over to get it, but oh no, you just lost ground. Because we know from geometry, if you're not running in a straight line away from something, then that thing is gaining on you if it is moving at the same speed. So suddenly this stage that would be extremely boring is filled with dread and excitement. Oh, am I going to make it? Oh, it's right behind me. Go, go, go. I can't divert attention. I can't grab that. I can't grab this. What am I going to focus on? Where's my resources going to go? Right? It's pretty amazing. Think to yourself, without this boulder, this level completely falls apart. It provides a terrible experience. Anyway, yes. Even the simple decision of do I swerve slightly to hit this box is a really difficult decision, in part because of the limited time pressure, Temple Run style. You don't know about the box before it's almost past you. And because of the boulder, which gives you a finite amount of time in this level with which to spend doing things like swerving to grab stuff. So in other words, limits are often a really good way to make the mundane really eventful and meaningful and memorable. Limited time is one limit that you can use, but there are others. Another one is limited chances. Let's see here. No takebacks. So games like Dark Souls. Games like Dark Souls will permanently change the state of the world if you make certain decisions. For instance, if you decide you're going to attack a friendly NPC, they will become aggressive and they will never change back. Well, technically you can change them back in some of those games, but if you kill them, then they're gone forever. All the services they provide are gone. And so every interaction with an NPC is something you need to be a little bit careful with, right? Another example of time pressure in this particular game, Crash Bandicoot, is this kind of platform. This platform actually kind of closes and shuts repeatedly. Oopsie. It closes and shuts repeatedly. And some of these platforms, when you jump on them, they start to close right away. So what would usually be a pretty easy and uneventful jump to make suddenly has a lot of drama associated with it. Another example is right here, okay? This jump would ordinarily be pretty, not very eventful, right? You just try the jump, and if you mess up, you're fine, right? Except for the fact that you might not be fine. This jump, touching the water kills you in Crash Bandicoot, and due to the presence of a life system and checkpoints, this jump could be extremely dramatic and very, nerve-wracking. If you happen to be on your last life, then you might really, really care about, okay, I need to size this up perfectly because I'm not going to get another chance. I'm going to lose some time and progress if I mess this up. So that's a way to make it a little bit more engaging, maybe, depending on who you are, a little bit more frustrating as well, okay? A game that's famous for imposing limits that really make the entire experience more engaging is Dead Rising. And there are some documentaries on the series out there. I think Matt McMuscles did one that kind of goes over like how the series evolved and how it lost a lot of its limits, and as a result, kind of lost its way. And the series is effectively canceled at this point. But this first game is all about you're an investigative journalist. You're running through a mall. This mall is relatively not that exciting. However, you have to move through the mall very quickly because it's based on a timer that's continuously moving. You can miss entire quests in this game if you're not at the right place at the right time. So it's very interesting. You have to suddenly, like walking through a mall, which used to be boring, it's not just an open space filled with nothing anymore. It is a series of routes, and it's a map in your head. Okay, I got to get from here to here. I have this much time to do it. So what route should I take that allows me to swing by and get a bunch of items, but then make it on time to my objective? What route do I know of? Do I know of any secret shortcuts? Resident Evil is a series that is defined by how it limits the player, whether that is limitations on health items, limitations on ammo. Okay, I've got 6 bullets. I know from this gun a zombie goes down in 4 bullets, but I've got 2 zombies in this hallway, so I can take down 1 zombie, and if I brute force this hallway, I'll take damage. I can take 3 hits. So is it worth it to find out what's down this hallway? I'm going to lose my ammo. I'm going to lose my damage. I might want to spend that somewhere else. I should go somewhere else, right? Those limits just create an amazing thought process that you have to go through. Anyway, okay. So let's keep going here. We've got about 10 more minutes, so we're not going to make it all the way through. But anyway, adding consequence, you can do that by adding risk in some ways. One way to that's really helpful to analyze your current game design is you can ask yourself, do we have situations that are brute forceable? In other words, situations where the player just really doesn't have to think at all. The player doesn't have to do anything. The player can just basically spend an unlimited resource. They can just spend their time forever to get past the situation. Can something be lost? Classic RPGs, if you go back and play Final Fantasy VII, what you'll find is that these games can have long stretches where they're not very interesting. They are stretches where you don't really need to think about what you need to do. You get into a situation, and the answer to that situation is the exact same answer you had last time. And if it doesn't work, then you just grind, right? So roguelikes kind of dodge the problem of grinding by using a mechanic called permadeath. Permadeath can be seen in roguelike games like Binding of Isaac, Rogue, of course. It's the idea that you have a character that you're building up, but if you happen to get into a bad situation and you die, then you lose that character. Or you lose a lot of progress, right? Start anew, start fresh. So, one thing you want to do with engaging decisions is also surprise. I don't think I want to go there, though. I want to stay here, and I want to finish up here. So, what you really don't want to do is you don't want the player to be just sitting there and doing nothing. A good example of this is would be a game like Earthbound. Earthbound's combat system, if you haven't played it, I'm playing through it right now. It is a game where effectively a good answer to every situation is to just mash the attack button. That's it. That's all you do. You always have an answer to every situation, it seems. And as a result, you just don't need to think about what you're trying to do. Let me find an image of Earthbound for you. This is a game, in my opinion, that is completely carried by its characters and setting, and not so much by its combat. Let me show you here. Here we are. Okay, but anyway, so I think that's probably all we want to do today. Okay, we'll cut it here, and when we come back on Monday, we will carry on with some more ways to make engaging decisions. Those ways are going to be surprise. So how can you add novelty and surprise to your decision making? And then the temporal aspect of decision making. So how can you make sure your game has many layers of decisions that are, your players thinking about tactics, so what's happening to them right now, but they're also thinking about strategy. What is the larger picture behind what they are trying to build and accomplish? The kind of thing like Civilization, right? Civilization is a series that's famous for the one more turn mindset, where you just have to play one more turn, right? But anyway, yes. So this is an RPG, a fairly old RPG, in which you can get through almost every combat situation by just using your vanilla attack. And it is, at least in the first few hours. And as a result, whenever you get into a fight, it's a slog. It is not an engaging, dynamic encounter. You don't feel like you're in a fight. You feel like you are just mashing the button. You just mash the attack button. You do that for every fight, and you win every fight. Classic RPGs are particularly vulnerable to this problem because if you ever get into a situation that requires you to do something other than just mash the default attack button, what you can do usually is you can just go and grind. You just go and grind. You go attack more things that you can defeat using the default attack. Just keep pressing A over and over. And eventually your attack gets so strong that you can brute force your way past the encounter that was trying to get you to do something else. And because this is always a viable approach, you'll always have some players who just decide to go that route. And that can result in some bored players. But anyway, so what I'd like to do is I'd like to give you about 4 minutes to ask any question you want. I'm going to turn the music back on, and we'll get some questions in, okay? Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us. I hope that you are having a good time with P1 Alpha, and I hope that your confidence is starting to grow a little bit. This course is one where the student experience really changes a lot over the course of it. And we see this through evals, we see this through the postmortems that you write. But this course tends to start off in kind of a frustrating way. You are investigating a totally new space, game development in the Unity ecosystem, and there's so many things that you just can't know about until you stumble upon them. But once you get many of these tools under your belt, you're doing a lot of work, but you have a good feeling associated with it, right? You're making decisions, you're being confident, and your choices are working out, right? You start to feel a sense of momentum. Okay, yeah. At the beginning of the course, I put in 2 hours and I got very little done. But at the end of the course, I'm putting in those same 2 hours and I feel incredible, right? Because I got 3 mechanics done and they feel great and they're very impactful and everything's juicy. it's a really good feeling. You're using design patterns that you can feel will be helpful in the future, not on games but on other things. So please look forward to that feeling. Okay. Okay. So do we have any questions? What are examples of non-RPG games? Non-RPG games that don't have much consequence? Is that what you're asking? So an example of a game that a non-RPG that has little to no consequence would be the exact game that I praised, Alien Isolation, if you play it on the very easy mode. When you choose a super easy mode, and I'm talking about relative to your skill level. If you choose a difficulty in most games that is too far beneath your skill level, what you'll find is that strategy just does not matter anymore. You can brute force your way through just about any scenario using the same strategy used for all the other scenarios. What this does is it takes a game that had a ton of interesting decisions in it, and it took them all and made them all trivial. Yes, there are decisions you can make, but none of them need to be made. None of them even need to be thought about. And so that's what tends to happen when you get into a difficulty setting that isn't fit for you, which is it's tough. Okay, what other questions do we have? Oh, what is a non-RPG game? So RPG stands for role-playing game, and it tends to be a genre that is loaded with story, that is loaded with different characters, that has you tweaking statistics, and it's a genre that relies very heavily on progression systems. So you will be role-playing as a character. You'll be making decisions for that character, who they interact with, what kind of equipment they take into battle, what they specialize in, what kind of skills and abilities they use. That's kind of where the role comes in. A non-RPG would be, maybe an example would be an action game. An action game might have only one character, might not focus as much on story, might not have as advanced progression systems, but tends to focus more on execution and reaction time. So you need to memorize this particular chain of commands that allow for this combo to happen. This combo is really good in this situation against this enemy. And much of the progression in an action game happens in your head instead of in the statistics that power how painful your character's attack is, for instance. Anyway, and these genres are very, very soft. They bleed into each other all the time. You'll find that most games have several different genres, or at least elements from several different genres in play. So Undertale might be considered a good example of a hybrid action/RPG game. It has a very heavy emphasis on story, and it does have some emphasis on character progression, leveling up and stuff like that. But it also has heavy action elements too, particularly elements from the shoot-'em-up/bullet hell genre, where you're dodging stuff that's coming at you and stuff like that. What are platformer games? Yash, I'm going to go ahead and recommend that when you have a question about what is a genre, I recommend that you go and just Google it. If you've heard of Mario, then you know what platformer games are. Games that are typically have you as a very athletic character, and where you have a bunch of traversal-oriented mechanics at your disposal. So a platformer like Celeste or Mario is typically going to give you a bunch of different actions that you can take that are all dedicated to getting you from one location to the next. Deciding which mechanics to use at any given time is going to be a big part of a platforming game experience. Okay, cool. That's all, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to come back with essentially the same lecture next time, in about 10 minutes, okay? I'm going to take a little bit of a break, and then we'll see you then, okay? Take care, everyone. Have a fantastic weekend, and I hope you stay safe, healthy, and make sure you're getting some sleep, okay? Make sure you're eating your 3 meals a day. It's going to help you a lot through P1 as we kind of come into the second half of it. Take care, everyone. See you in a bit.